Would you like to? Aha, very good. Thank you. Now I got to get rid of the got it. Okay.
You want to introduce Mark?
Would you guys, I've got plenty of copy here in front of me, but I know he's a personal friend, and if you'd like to introduce him, we'd be delighted.
I'm going to switch that over to Paul. Hi, Mark.
Okay, super.
Hello. Well, Mark, I don't remember where we met. Do you?
Gettysburg, Pennsylvania.
Okay. Well, Mark and his artistic partner, Johann, how does he pronounce that name?
Bjurman.
Bjurman, right.
Bjurman.
They returned to Gettysburg to restore the mural that's going to be the topic, as well as the brickyard fight that it depicts in Mark's talk today. They came to Gettysburg in 2001. I remember it was right after 9/11. It was in that month of October following 9/11. And they stayed, was it a week or more that you stayed at our house?
2 weeks.
2 weeks, okay, well, that was fun.
Please, rent free.
That's true. We had a house about a block from the Coster Avenue site. That was the place where the regiment that Mark is going to discuss today fought, and where the mural, of course, which he and his partner Johann created. So Mark and I have known each other for a long time, and I immediately thought of him when we needed a speaker in December after the untimely passing of John Fearnow. I think he was supposed to be our speaker this month. So Mark has been involved with Civil War studies for a long time. How many books have you got under your belt now, Mark?
I have published 6 full-length Civil War books, a few booklets, and dozens of articles.
Yes, so that speaks for itself. So I'll let Mark begin his talk. I'm sure you're anxious to hear his presentation. Thanks again, Mark, for doing our presentation this month.
Well, thank you. I'm delighted to be here, and it's just really great to reconnect with you and Carolyn, who became such good friends of myself and my partner, Johann Bjurman, in the course of our mural work in Gettysburg. Actually, we met back in 1999 when you invited me to give a talk down there to your Lincoln group of DC about the mural. And
okay, that was before the restoration you did in 2000.
Yeah, a couple of years before, and you and Carolyn very kindly invited me to stay at your house on North Stratton Street. And in subsequent visits to Gettysburg, I stayed at your house every single time at your invitation. And as you indicated, Johann and I stayed at your place for 2 weeks when we did the restoration in '01. And then I got an email from you saying you were moving to Arizona. And I sent a whining email in return saying, I'm going to be homeless in Gettysburg. What am I going to do? And you said, well, you know, our neighbor, Sue Sipperly, right next door on North Stratton Street, contact Sue, which I did. And I've been staying with Sue ever since.
Right. So I understand. That's great.
Yeah, it's wonderful.
We had dinner with you and Sue and several other people a couple years ago, as I recall.
Yeah, last time.
In Gettysburg. I think it's the last time I saw you.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm ready to make my presentation. Before I do, I'm going to preface it with a couple remarks. Gene, Brian, a week or so ago, I got some emails purporting to be from you that turned out to be part of this credit card scamming that's been going on around the country. And I just want to make you aware of that. You probably already are aware of it from hearing from some other contacts of yours.
Probably only about 90 people.
Yeah, there you go.
Right. Yeah, that was pretty sophisticated, but fortunately, most everybody knew me well enough to know that it wasn't me. So thanks for the heads up.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because just today I received some from relatives of my wife that live in Wales. The same thing going on. So, you know, this is obviously a global pestilence. The only other thing I'd like to preface my presentation with is In 1992, I founded the Rhode Island Civil War Roundtable. And we adopted a constitution and bylaws, as your group just did today. And for several years, we followed them to the letter. But then we went kind of rogue. Well, what happened was I was booking all the speakers. I was putting out an 8-page newsletter 9 times a year. I was presiding at the meetings, and eventually that just sort of became habitual. And we haven't had an election in many years. I make jokes all the time about being a benevolent dictator. Everybody laughs. We've had the same vice president, secretary, and treasurer for a number of years now. So follow your bylaws to the letter until it no longer becomes necessary, I guess is my perspective on the whole deal. But in any case, best wishes to the Tucson Civil War Roundtable from the Rhode Island Civil War Roundtable. And with that, let me see if I can share my screen. This is the one I want to share. Y'all seeing that?
Yeah, I see it.
Okay. Now, when I have tried to do this as a slideshow, I haven't had any success. For some reason, it doesn't work. So if this is amenable to you all, I'm just going to do it the way that is right now.
Looks fine.
Okay.
Hey, Mark, I just try one thing, will you?
Yeah.
Go up on the top of your screen there, and you see animations, then you see slideshow.
Yeah.
Click on that just for a second.
Yeah, I've tried this, play from start.
And well, yeah, you could try that. I was going to say set up slideshow, but
Okay, let's try that. Oh boy. Presented by a speaker, full screen. Slides all. Using timings if present. I don't have timings.
okay, well, you don't have to do any of that.
Do that anyway.
And
Okay.
then do you have a thing where you save that?
No, I didn't see a save that.
All right. Well, then go over to your play from start. Just give it a try. And if it doesn't work for you, then you can go back to the way you were going to do it.
Okay, is that better?
Nothing's
Here's-
changed yet.
Oh, well, I've got the full thing on here on my screen.
Oh, that's exciting.
At the bottom right, you see the little screen icon next to the book icon.
Nope, I've got none of that. I've gone into the
Okay.
slideshow thing.
Okay,
So what I'm going to do is end this, and I'm afraid you're going to have to put up with what you got here. For some reason, the slideshow, I've tried this several times in making Zoom presentations. It just doesn't want to seem to do it. So this is a booklet that was published in 2020. Yeah. Which didn't prove to be a great year to promote a book, but that's the way it goes. As the subtitle indicates, the book is in 2 parts, the Brickyard Fight and the Mural. I'm kind of curious how many of you have been to Coster Avenue. I know Paul and Carolyn lived right around the corner from it, but have any others?
yeah, I've been there. This is Steve. Yes, I've
Yes.
been there many times. It's well worth going to.
Okay, good. Well, I'm glad that to hear that some of you have been out there. The rest of you will get a little glimpse of it here visually. Now, I'm going to sort of give a very brief overview of the Brickyard Fight. On the afternoon of July 1st, 1863, the first day of the Battle of Gettysburg, the 11th and 1st Corps were being driven by the Confederates from their positions north and west of the town, back through the town to Cemetery Hill. And the brigade of Colonel Charles R. Coster, Union Brigade, was dispatched from Cemetery Hill, where they had been held in reserve, down through the town to cover the retreat of the 11th Army Corps. And on the map you're seeing on the left shows the positions of the brigade in this rear guard action that they engaged in. For some inexplicable reason, one of the regiments, the 73rd Pennsylvania, was split from the brigade and deployed near the railroad depot. The rest of the brigade continued out Stratton Street to John Kuhn's brickyard, where they filed through a carriage gateway and took position along a post and rail fence bordering the northern part of the brickyard. And they had scarcely taken position when two Confederate brigades appeared in their front. Harry Hayes's Louisiana Brigade and Colonel Isaac Avery's North Carolina Brigade. The North Carolinians and the Louisianans outnumbered Custer's 3 regiments more than 3-1. Custer had fewer than 1,000 men in line at this point. The Confederates triple those numbers. And it was a very short, forlorn stand. The 134th New York, which held the right of the Union line, was driven by Avery's North Carolinians, suffering tremendous casualties and killed and wounded. The 154th New York, in attempting to retreat, went back towards the left, their left, to go through the same carriage gateway that they had entered the brickyard. But they found that the 27th Pennsylvania, to their left, had been driven already by the Confederates, and the Confederates were in control of Stratton Street. And as more than one member of the regiment put it, they were gobbled up. They suffered killed and wounded, but the large portion of the regiment, largest portion, was captured by the Confederates. The 154th New York went in with 265 men and came out with more than 200 casualties. They had a 77% loss rate, which was one of the highest Union regimental casualty counts in the Army of the Potomac at Gettysburg. So the map on the upper right shows Custer Avenue today, and you'll notice that the number of streets in the neighborhood has certainly increased tremendously since the era of the Civil War. And we're going to take a look and see, what does Custer Avenue look like? Well, the earliest photographs are pictures taken after the monuments, the first monument went up there. And that's the monument to the 154th New York. This is a picture from the 3-volume set commonly known as New York at Gettysburg. The monument was erected and dedicated in 1890. And this is facing south towards the town of Gettysburg. But as you can see, there's still a lot of open space at the site of the former John Kuhn's brickyard. The brickyard long since gone by 1890. Here's another view looking east. And look at how open and uninhabited the expanse is. Again, that's the monument to the 154th New York. Here's a group of veterans at the monument, basically looking in the same direction as the previous picture, but from a slightly different angle. And notice this post and rail fence that's running along in the background. I believe that to be the original fence that was there at the time of the battle, demarcating the northern boundary of Kuhn's brickyard. Here's a photograph of the same veterans on the same occasion with the rest of their party. And another picture of veterans at the monument.
Hey, could you back up one picture, please?
Certainly.
Okay, from the viewer, what direction is the viewer looking?
The viewer is looking east. It's very similar to this. Well, it's the same as this, but to this one as well, except from a slightly different angle. This is looking east as well.
Thank you.
A little more east-southeast, whereas these two are looking slightly east-northeast. Incidentally, these photos are sort of a mystery to me because they are certainly the earliest photos taken at Coster Avenue, these two with the veterans at the monument. However, they're undated. And it would appear that they might be photos of the veterans when the monument was dedicated in 1890, except for one crucial factor. The photos were taken by Levi Mumper and Company, and we know that William Tipton, the very well-known Gettysburg photographer, took photos at the dedication because they are listed in his catalog, but we've yet to turn up a Tipton photograph of veterans at the monument. So these are sort of a mystery, as is this one, another undated photograph of veterans. And again, this one's looking pretty much due south. And you can see there's some houses there on the skyline in the background. That's along York Street, but still a very open area. Here we are looking again east, slightly southeast at Coster Avenue, but this is in 1963. This photograph was taken by a student at Gettysburg High School to illustrate a little report he wrote. He lived in the neighborhood and he was writing a report. So here we see the monument to the 154th New York, and over here, a white marble monument to the 27th Pennsylvania. That monument originally stood on East Cemetery Hill, but when the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania erected monuments to their regiments, this white marble monument had been erected by the veterans themselves. The state of Pennsylvania erected a monument to the 27th PA on East Cemetery Hill, whereupon they moved this one down to Coster Avenue. So here's Coster Avenue, 1963, the centennial of the war. And as we can see, there's some buildings there right behind Coster Avenue, very close to Coster Avenue.
Excuse me, which way were we looking? And is Coster Avenue that dirt lane in front of us?
That's Hazel Alley, which runs perpendicular to Coster Avenue. Coster Avenue extends to North Stratton Street. So in other words, from the camera position is pretty much still on Coster Avenue, but today it's paved between Stratton Street and Hazel Alley. We'll get better pictures here as we go along. A classmate of mine from the Rhode Island School of Design took this photograph in 1969, I believe. And again, you can see these buildings, how close they are to Coster Avenue, which is the boundary of which is those old concrete and pipe fences, very few of which are still left on the battlefield. Again, the monument to the 154th New York. This is the first of a series of photos I took on a visit in April of 1970. Again, the white marble monument to the 27th Pennsylvania. There's a marker to Coster's Brigade and the monument to the 154th New York. Here again, concrete post and pipe fencing and houses nearby. Here's a view from behind the 154th monument, looking up this street and these houses. So the town of Gettysburg has swallowed up Coster Avenue. Coster Avenue is part of the Gettysburg National Military Park. It's the smallest portion of the park. It's only 3/4 of an acre. It's this isolated little island in the borough of Gettysburg, well separated from the rest of the National Military Park. And here's perhaps the most important photo I took that day, because here we see, well, actually, this is my wife here taking the picture that we just saw And I'm taking this photograph because, well, little did I know it. This is a concrete block wall that is being erected to extend the warehouse of the roofing company, Goldsmith Roofing, which owns that property. And that wall is about to become very important in our story. Here's a picture of me, date unknown. The wall's all finished now. You can see how high the grass is at Coster Avenue. The National Park Service weren't always very diligent about maintenance at the avenue because it was one of the least visited portions of the Gettysburg National Military Park. Here's another view looking in the other direction towards North Stratton Street. You see that the ground slopes in that direction. And again, the wall, concrete block wall, blank. And when I first saw this wall, I said to myself, this is an unsightly backdrop to the monument to the 154th New York. It's only 10 feet away from it. But then the thought occurred to me that I could make the wall disappear, much like you can barely see it in this photograph. Again, this is looking, here's Hazel Alley in the foreground. We're looking down Coster Avenue, and you can barely see a corner of the wall. And I thought to myself, I can make this wall disappear and bring back the scene that occurred on this very site by means of painting a mural. I have a Bachelor of Fine Arts in Illustration from the Rhode Island School of Design. Researching and writing Civil War history has occupied much more of my time than creating artwork, but I put it out there. I decided I want to try to create this mural. And the first thing I did, of course, was contact Roy Goldsmith and Company and ask for their permission. And in response, I was told, basically, you know, if you don't fall off a ladder and sue us, you can put a painting up on our wall. So that was great. We had a very good cooperation from the Goldsmith Company. And in 1977, I really started to pursue this project in earnest. And here's a pencil sketch I did on site of the spot where I plan to put this painting. The artistic challenge to me was to get a point of view where I didn't have to portray the town of Gettysburg in the background, because that would have been very difficult to recreate accurately. So here's an early sketch, sort of a bird's eye view. Here's another preliminary sketch. This is pretty close to the eventual point of view that I adopted. And in the background, you see these two beehive-shaped structures. Those are the brick kilns. Now, I should mention that as I was doing these drawings, here's another one showing the kilns a little closer. This sketch I rejected because this is more of a skirmish line than a full line of battle. But I'm getting closer to the landscape, where the fences are, where I want things to be. I had the good fortune to know Bill Frazanito of Gettysburg photography fame. And Bill at one point told me, Mark, do you know that there are a couple of Civil War era brick kilns out on the York Road? I was unaware of that, but I went out there and I photographed them and sketched them, and they served as my models because I figured any brick kilns that dated from the Civil War era out on the York Road would have looked the same as brick kilns over off of Stratton Street. That was great. In addition to Bill Frazanito, I enlisted Kathy George Harrison, who was the historian at the Gettysburg National Military Park at that time, and an old neighbor of Paul and Caroline's on Stratton Street, Colonel J. Matt Sheeds, who was a legend in Gettysburg. He taught in the high school for years and years and years, and he was a guide on the battlefield. And he knew Gettysburg and the battle inside out. As a matter of fact, when President John Fitzgerald Kennedy visited Gettysburg, it was Colonel Sheeds that gave him his tour of the battlefield. And Colonel Sheeds used to play baseball at Coster Avenue when he was a kid. So he took a great interest in so these experts were critiquing my sketches. And finally, I came up with an inch to a foot scale pencil sketch. And this is it. It's the same sketch that adorns the cover of the book. I was satisfied with it. My critics in Gettysburg were satisfied with it, my expert critics. Of course, no illustration is going to replicate reality. But everybody seemed to think that this, as best we know, is probably a pretty good representation of what happened on July 1st, 1863 at Coons Brickyard. One of the Confederates officers in his official report wrote something to this effect: the Yankees stubbornly held their position until we jumped the fence into their midst. Obviously the climactic portion of the battle and what I chose to portray. So now here's the issue. I've got this sketch I'm satisfied with. Again, it's an inch to a foot scale. The wall was 80 feet long. It tapered from the left end at about 12 feet due to the configuration of the ground to about 10.5 feet on the right side. And I was used to working small as an artist. I knew I couldn't do this by myself. And fortunately, a mutual friend introduced me to this guy, Johann Bierman. And Johann had done a lot of mural work in Rhode Island. He was making his living painting billboards to a good extent. And I met Johann and told him about my project, and he said he'd be happy to collaborate with me on it, which was great. Johann further convinced me that rather than go down to Gettysburg and paint the mural directly onto the concrete block wall, and you all know how much texture there is to a concrete block wall, that we paint it in his studio in Providence, basically like a billboard on multi-density overlay board, MDO board, that had 2x4 backings to make them rigid, which would enable us to work from home and not have to go down to Gettysburg and rely on, the weather and spend money on lodgings, etc. But we could paint it right in Johann's studio and then put it on a truck, take it to Gettysburg and attach it to the wall. Whereby in the future, it could be removed if need be from the wall. So that sounded smart to me. So that's what we did. And basically what we did was we made transparencies of my pencil sketch. We projected them onto the sections, as we called them. We had 24 feet wide sections. And then we would trace the outlines of everything that's going on. And then we did an underpainting of 2 or 3 colors. And then we did the finished painting over that. Now, Johann's studio only held 5 sections at a time. So what we would do is we'd paint 4.5, slide the half finished one down to the other end and put up 4 more sections and then repeat until complete. And this still blows my mind, but somehow Johann and I painted this entire massive mural in 5 weeks' time. A lot of it, because of the detail, was painted with 1-inch brushes. Here's a picture of the mural in progress in Johann's studio. And we finished it. We briefly showed it here in Providence in the courtyard of this massive brick building that Johann had a studio in, a former mill, I suppose. Then we put it on a truck, and Johann and an assistant of his drove the truck, and I drove my car down to Gettysburg, and we installed the mural. Here it is going up. Angle iron was put on the wall, and this thing hooked onto it and was attached to it and got nailed into some wood strips along the wall. Now, Johann and his assistant got down to Gettysburg before I did because I had a little mishap on the way down there. And you'll have to read the book to get the hideous details of the hellish trip that I had, which culminated with me in Gettysburg Hospital after getting injured down there, putting this thing up. So this trip to Gettysburg, which was supposed to be the culmination of a long project and a celebratory time, turned out to be the opposite for me personally. But the mural got up. There's Johann and I in front of the finished thing at the monument. And it was really gratifying to realize that I had pulled this off. My first book was published in 1981, and in the author's blurb on the back, it said that I was planning this mural in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. And my advice to anybody that comes up with grandiose schemes is don't put it in writing, because then you feel compelled to, see the thing through. But I managed to see it through. So here we are, 1980. This was 1988. The mural went up. The 125th anniversary of the battle. And that July, we went back down and I went back down and we had a dedication ceremony. And Kathy George Harrison from the military park was there and spoke a little bit. And I gave a talk about the Brickyard fight. And here's how the mural looked. This photograph was taken by Walter B. Lane of Gettysburg, who was the dean of Gettysburg photographers for many years. It's a difficult thing to get a good photograph of, but he got a really good one. And actually, I used this photo on the cover of a booklet that I put out the next year after the mural went up, because I wanted to offer visitors a kind of souvenir of the mural. And I thought of a postcard, but I decided to self-publish a booklet. It was only 8 pages long, but I wanted to tell the story of the battle and have that as part of this. So Walter Lane took this photograph for the cover. Now, for the first 7 or 8 years, the mural looked just as good as the day it was painted. But eventually Mother Nature, relentless Mother Nature, started getting her hands on the thing. And you can see here how the mural has faded. Now, we had put 2 coats of marine spar varnish on the mural for protection, but eventually the varnish started to alligator off and there was some damage to the paint underneath. Here's a detail showing what the surface looks like in an extreme close-up. So we've got a dilemma here. I had funded the mural out of my own pocket. I looked into getting grants. Individuals in America can't get grants for art projects. You have to be sponsored by an organization or an organization. So eventually I just, blew my bank account and it was to pay for materials, pay Johann for his time, running the truck, et cetera, et cetera. And by this point, the mural had received recognition. I knew that people were now going to Coster Avenue to see it. And I was reluctant to have to shell out more money to repair it. Then I had the good fortune to meet this fellow, Edwin C. Bars. Do I have to tell you all who who Ed Bars was, former chief historian of the National Park Service, legendary battlefield guide. Ed was spending like 2/3 of the year leading tours of American historical sites and telling folks what went on there strictly from his capacious memory. He just knew American history inside out. And Ed came up to speak to our Rhode Island Civil War Roundtable. And I had the pleasure of hosting him in my home. And here I just served him breakfast. And Ed told me, Mark, before your mural went up, I never took visitors to Coster Avenue on my tours because there was no way to interpret the battle there. But ever since the mural went up, I've been taking people there all the time, every visit. Whereupon I said, well then, Ed, you know that the mural's in rough shape now. And I've been trying to raise money, but it's not something I'm very good at to fix it up, to do a restoration. And Ed said to me, I think I can help you out. Well, it turns out that every year, a group of Ed's followers get together in June to celebrate his birthday. And I'm speaking in the present tense. Of course, this is all past since Ed passed away. They used to get together to celebrate his birthday. And at the end of the evening, they would make a substantial charitable contribution to the Civil War preservation cause of Ed's choice. Now, Ed was in my home in January of '01. And that April, I got an email from a member of the Bars Brigade, as his staunchest followers call themselves, inviting me to Ed's birthday party that year because the Coster Avenue mural was Ed's choice to receive the charitable contribution that year. Paul, were you and Carolyn down there in Falls Church for this party?
Yes, I believe we were.
Yeah, it was wild. For some reason, they chose a rock and roll theme, which led Ed to comment on the fact that Elvis Presley was born in Tupelo, Mississippi, whereupon he went into a minute description of the Battle of Tupelo down to the regimental level.
It's classic Ed.
Yeah, exactly. It was just wonderful. At the end of the night, he had like this mop-like wig on his head, lip syncing to some music. It was just a ball. And at the end of the night, they handed me an envelope stuffed full of checks. And so 2 days later, on July 1st, 2001, Ed and a group came to Coster Avenue. Of course, it's the anniversary of the battle. And we met in front of the monument on Coster Avenue. I'll tell you, having Ed Bars call me a friend has been one of the highlights of my life working in Civil War history. He was just such a great guy. So here we are, July 1st. Well, Johan and I wanted to get this thing done as soon as possible. So the last week in September, and as Paul noted, this was right after September 11th. The last week in September, and the first week in October, we had 2 weeks of absolutely beautiful weather. And after we left Paul and Carolyn's house early in the morning, we'd get over there and we'd paint all day till it got dark. And what took us 5 weeks to paint initially, we repainted in 2 weeks. There might have been a diminishment in quality, slight diminishment, but this is how it looked afterwards, after the restoration. And fortunately for us, digital files were made of this and a print was made. And I'll explain why that turned out to be fortunate here shortly. Ed was so busy that we couldn't rearrange a rededication until more than a year later. So this is October of '02. Ed and a big group of his followers and a good-sized group of 154th New York descendants and other people gathered at Coster Avenue to rededicate the Coster Avenue mural. Well, of course, after the passage of a number of years, the same thing started to happen. And the mural not only was in need of a repainting, but as you can see towards the bottom there were some structural issues going on. And Johan and I, at this point, we had been joking for quite a while about being down there in Gettysburg with our walkers and wheelchairs, painting this thing for the umpteenth time. But it wasn't a joke. I mean, I was at this point, I was thinking, I gotta find some way to reproduce this thing on a permanent substance of some sort that can be applied to the wall and last for a very long time. Johan and I looked at vinyl. Nah, that wasn't going to work. And I was at a function at the Providence Art Club, of which my wife is a member. And I explained this dilemma I had to a person there. And this woman said to me, have you ever thought of reproducing it on glass? And I never had. But I looked into it. And a local firm called Lucid Glass Studio had done a mural for a local artist, reproduced on glass. And I talked to them and learned about this process. And it's an Israeli firm called Diptech that has invented this technology. And in essence, it's like gigantic inkjet printers that use ceramic inks. So the glass goes through the printer where the ceramic ink is applied to it, and then it goes through a couple of kiln-like heat treatment things that literally fuse the imagery to the glass. So if you feel the back of the glass where the ceramic ink imagery is just as smooth as the front of the glass. And it occurred to me, this is the solution right here, because this is going to last for a very, very long time. And so I contacted the folks at Lucid Glass, and they explained to me that the actual production, the Diptech production, is done out in Western Pennsylvania at a place called Standard Bent Glass. My wife and I went out there at one point and checked it out and got a tour and saw the Diptech machine, and we decided to go for it. It just seemed to be the smart thing to do. And so here again is a close-up of how the old mural was looking. So we had the glass done. But to do that, we needed to create new digital files, because the ones that had been made to make the print of version number 2 were inadequate to be used to blow up to the size we needed to blow up. So what we did was we used those files to create a print about 13 feet long, I think. And Johan took that print and painted over it to create the artwork that would then be photographed and digital files made from that. So here is his painting, and this is how the final mural looked. And this was important to me. We were able to make some changes, including adding this line of Confederates here, showing them outflanking the left of the Union line, which was an important historical thing. I had Johan do this artwork because A, he's a better painter than I am. Well, that's it. A, he's a better painter than I am. I call Johan the fastest brush east of the Pecos, but he took a good amount of time with this, and I was very pleased with it. I painted a self-portrait into the original mural, and when Johan painted the final version here, he added this rather animated portrait of me to the mural, which is nice. Here I am with Clint Hopkins and Mark Moran, of Lucid Glass Studios, who sort of were the general contractors in the project. And we're just uncrating one of the glass panels that had been shipped from standard vent glass. And this is in the, when did this happen? 2018, I think. Yeah. And so the glass mural went up. Now, one thing that some visitors don't like about the glass mural is it's glass and it reflects. So here's a photo I took of the monument to the 154th New York reflected in the mural. People that see the painting are always curious about this upside down US buckle on this Confederate. I'm sure some of you have heard of the situation where Confederates taking Yankee equipment would use these belt plates at some point, but put them upside down as a sign of disrespect. It's not impossible, however, to get a photograph of the completed glass mural without reflections. And this picture by my friend Sue Sipperly shows. You can see everything there without the reflections. So the way that I sort of summarize this whole experience is that when I first visited Coster Avenue, and did so for numerous times before the mural went up, I never saw another visitor there. On every visit I've made to Coster Avenue since the mural went up, for some just as short as a half hour or an hour, visitors have come by. And so my goal of drawing attention to this overlooked part of the Battle of Gettysburg and overlooked portion of the Gettysburg battlefield by means of this mural, I think in the long run has been successful. And so now, as I'm getting a little hoarse, I'll stop blathering and take any questions that might arise.
Okay, first off, if you want to unmute folks, or you can put questions in the chat.
Okay. Mark, this is Gene, and my goodness, what a project and what a brilliant presentation. I'm blown away. A couple of questions, and one of them is a practical thing. Because it is removed from the major part of the Gettysburg battlefield Memorial Park, how are you protecting it, or how's the Park Service protecting it from vandalism, which is inevitable?
Right. Yeah. You know what, Gene, when I first proposed this to my Gettysburg friends, Bill Frazanito, Kathy George Harrison, Colonel Sheets, everybody said, Mark, somebody's going to vandalize it. It's inevitable. Somebody's going to vandalize it. Well, nobody has laid a malicious hand on it, and it's been up since 1988. You know, it's been wild. And now that it's on the glass, I think if somebody went down there and spray painted something on there, it could be easily cleaned off.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, the glass is, I think, 3/4 of an inch thick. The promotional materials that Standard Bag Glass has shows trucks driving over this glass without harming it. You know, it's sturdy, and most importantly to me, it's going to last for a very, very long time. I have no idea how long it's going to last. It's going to well outlast me. That's for darn sure.
Right.
So it'll be somebody else's problem. And there's also this sort of anomalous thing going on where I own the mural. Goldsmith Roofing owns the building the mural's attached to, the NPS is 5 feet away, but they don't have any say over what happens over that. So, what's going to happen in the future? I don't know.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know.
Well, it's been a fascinating part of that battle that I certainly didn't know about, and I know I speak on behalf of our group. Just really can't thank you enough for bringing this to our attention. So, other questions, comments, please?
Yeah,
have
can you hear me?
I have a question.
This is Paul.
Go ahead, Paul.
Yeah, as I recall, Mark, when you and Johan were there in 2001.
I'm sorry.
You had beautiful weather for that stretch of time that you were there. I don't think it
Oh.
rained one day.
No, it didn't. It was beautiful. Absolutely
Yeah.
beautiful.
But weren't you interrupted from time to time by curious visitors who word got around town about your project and they came by, especially people that were interested in the Civil War? And although they interrupted your work, they often brought welcome refreshments to you and Johan.
Uh,
But as I recall, didn't somebody give you a brick that was embossed with the word Gettysburg?
well, I do have a brick. The neighbor that lives to the east of Coster Avenue was an avid gardener and was digging in his garden and kept finding these bricks. So I brought this one home and I wrote on it, brick from, Coons Brickyard in Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Does this brick date from the Civil War? I don't know, but to me, it's kind of a cool souvenir.
Yeah, but didn't that inspire you added bricks to the painting, didn't you? You added some bricks to the painting?
Yeah. Bricks lying on the ground, just sort of
On the
scattered.
ground, exactly. Yeah, I thought that was a nice touch.
Yeah. Yeah, you mentioned the visitors. Whenever some visitors would show up, Johan and I are working, Johan would say, you talk to them. It's what you have to say. So I generally would, but then we got into this, I mentioned this in the book too. We developed this little routine where we would tell folks that I can tell them all about what happened at the Battle of Gettysburg, but if they wanted to know anything about General George B. McClellan, they'd have to ask Johan, because Johan was the world's expert on George McClellan. Now, of course, Johan knew nothing about George McClellan. It just became a running joke with us, right? But Johan eventually read Stephen Sears' biography of George McClellan, and he started to learn about George McClellan. He became interested in McClellan, and I wouldn't call him the world's expert, but he certainly knows a lot more about George Brinton McClellan than your average American. And let me just grab something here.
Steve, while he's doing that, you're next, okay?
Okay.
So Johan recently presented me with this. This
Great.
very nice portrait of the
Yeah.
general. And I presented Johan with this, a fake little carte de visite of McClellan and his wife, and I replaced Mrs. McClellan's head with Johan's. I think it was a little puzzled by that one, but that's okay. Johan and I just had this great relationship. I mean, we just really hit it off, and it was a good artistic partnership, and we've just become very good friends. So this whole mural project was tremendously satisfying to me. And it's seriously the last serious artwork that I've done. I mean, since then I've been drawing blue jays. I've got a thing about blue jays. I've been writing and illustrating books for my 2 little granddaughters. And I've been drawing flyers for my band. I've had a third lifelong passionate pursuit, which is playing music. And so I draw flyers for my band and stuff like that, but no serious artwork. Although I should mention, I did another serious artwork, and I'll grab that. Where are you? Right here. I did this for a group that I'm involved in called Citizens Advocating Memorial Preservation. And this is a illustration of 2 Civil War veterans outside the Cattaraugus County Memorial and Historical Building. which was dedicated to their memory in 1914 and served as the County Historical Museum in Cattaraugus County, New York, until 2004 when they moved the museum out of it, which should have never happened. And in 2013, the county voted to tear this place down. It's the most important Civil War memorial in Cattaraugus County, New York, and they voted to tear it down, whereupon I led a protest against that. And eventually a group was formed, Citizens Advocating Memorial Preservation, and we're fighting to restore this place now. We now own it. We talked the county finally into selling it to us.
Very
So
good.
wish us luck. Send
There
us
you go.
money.
Steve?
Yeah, Mark, a couple of things. I've been to Gettysburg about 8 times. And of course, the first 2 times I was there, I think you hit the biggies, you know?
Yeah.
And finally, being a Civil War buff as a kid, I always remember, I like the map you still have up. I finally had time to let me see some of the more thing. And I noticed that thing about where to find where the famous picture of the children of the battlefield, Sergeant Amos Humiston. And
Indeed.
that's what, and you see it on the map there. It's only a couple of blocks away, and like a 5-minute walk.
Right.
And then I've wandered up, and this was probably around 2000. Well, let me just wander up the street. I've never heard of the Brickyard. And when I rounded the corner, was absolutely stunned by the mural. And from then on, I told anybody, like I'm telling you guys now, if you ever go to Gettysburg, you gotta go to the Brickyard. You absolutely gotta go. It's cool. And it is one of those forgotten things of Gettysburg. One thing that struck me is it's pure serendipity, you know, the weathering, but in terms of the color fading, it's fortunate that the mural is on the north face of the wall, so it's not in direct sunlight.
Right.
And that's just pure serendipity, but thank God for, but guys, if you ever go to Gettysburg, definitely go to the Brickyard and go to the Humiston Monument, which is a couple of blocks away.
Good.
Well, thank
Okay.
you. I very much appreciate that. And that gives me an opportunity to plug my second book, Gettysburg's Unknown Soldier, The Life, Death, and Celebrity of Amos Humiston, which I would love to come back someday and tell you about, out in paperback last year, 2 years ago, from Gettysburg Publishing. And I had the good fortune to bust this human interest story that is very well known in Gettysburg lore, wide open, and tell the story of Amos Humiston, the living man. In all the tellings of the story since the Civil War, and there have been very many, Amos is always a corpse on the battlefield, clutching this picture of his 3 children. I had the good fortune to discover a lot about Amos, the living man, the most important of which was finding his wartime letters, in one of which he mentions he wrote to his wife, Felinda, "I got the likeness of the children, and it meant more to me than anything you could have sent me. How I want to see them and their mother again is more than I can tell." And so this man, celebrated as a dead man, speaks to us again in his own words. I've had a lot of thrills doing this Civil War work, but discovering Amos's letters and making friends with his descendants that held this material has certainly been right up there as one of the greatest, one of the greatest.
Mark, we will hold you to that promise, and we will be in touch. That would
Okay,
be an
thank you.
excellent program. So
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me today. I very much appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark.
our pleasure. If you would send either to me or to Elise how we can get your